Okay, so let's bring this great work of art to life. But before we do so, I'm going to have a quick peek inside the model. There's the models folder. Here's the category class. The category file actually has two components. It has a category model, and then it has a little data access layer that's going to enable me to build some test data, and then it's going to, so we scroll down, allow me to create, update, delete, and get a single record by ID, get a single object by ID. If we have a quick look at the way that the build test list comes to life, it's actually, it's born whenever an object of this class is born. It's the constructor of the class that brings build test list to life. And the role of the build test list method is to do exactly that. It's to build a list of test data. Each of these segments of code are declaring an object and adding that object to our list of objects that we'll be drawing down out of the model and into the controllers. We don't have a database, not yet. We don't need one. What I've got is a list of categories that are going to be there for me to add to, delete from, update, and I filter if I really wanted to. That's the model. This is the data. Let's have a look inside the controller. The controller we're going to be playing with is the category controller. Let's bring it to life. Over here I have a little debug control drop down. I'm going to use Internet Explorer. Why not? The model's been built. Explorer's been booted up. A small version of IIS has come to life. It's called localhost. We're waiting for localhost. And here it is. Here's our MVC application. But where's our categories? Well, what I need to do is I need to drive the routing from the address bar through the routing engine into the index method within the category controller. And I do that by simply appending the word category to the URL. Press enter, and the index method has come to life. It has dived into the categories model. It's got hold of the categories list, which is populated with my test data. It is now creating a local variable called catList and sending that catList to the view. It's, where have you gone? It's down there somewhere. There we go. And here's the result. It's a list of categories that have come straight out of the model. Maybe I want to edit one. I click edit. What a shocker. What do I want to edit? Well, I'll edit this to be, we have various items collected together for your convenience. I press save, and there's the modification. We'll talk about why this list has changed the sequence later on, but not quite yet. I can look at some of the details. They're not pretty ugly. The HTML that you get out the box isn't particularly sophisticated, but I'm actually going to have a look at that particular record. When I hover my mouse over details, I want you to notice what pops up in the bottom left hand corner down here, because that is the URL that's going to be sent back to the routing engine. There we go. I have HTTP localhost, then I have the categories controller, then I have the details action, but I'm also sending it the parameter 1. I'm actually sending it the category ID associated with that particular category. So the details method down here will consume that ID. It's going to then use the getById method to find that particular object. This particular object is of type category model, so this category will then be sent to the details view as requested. Well, that's the plan anyway. Where have you gone? There you go. So let's have a look at the details, and that's the default view. That's the property, its name, accessory packages. There's the description, And there's our edited description. And I'm going to go back to the list because details is not particularly exciting. I could get it straight away, should I? Edit back to list, edit back to list, edit back to list. No, I'll go back to list. What I'm now going to do is create a new category. So I'm going to press create. Now, once again, I want it to have a peak in the bottom left-hand corner, down here. If I hover over create new, I'm going to http localhost / category because that's the name of the controller, / create because that's the name of the action within that controller that I want to bring to life. It's a two-phase process. The first phase is to create a form of the right shape. The second process is to grab hold of the data out of that form and then poke the data into the model in order to modify the state of that model. So let's press create. It's generated a form of the right shape because the views were generated or scaffolded from a model, a strongly typed model. I'm going to give this an imaginative name called test name, and I'm going to give this, well, a description. I'm going to press create, but this time it's not going to drive it to this create action. It's going to bring to life this create action. The first thing it says is, hang on, is the model valid? Well, let's assume it is because I filled in both fields. What it's now going to do is it's going to grab hold of the model that I sent it from the view. I'm going to use that model via the create method to modify the state of the model. Having done that, it's simply going to return me back to the index, which, if you remember, is the original list. That's the plan. And it appears that our plan seems to have worked because we now have something called test name with a test description. Now, one of the nice things that you get out the box with MVC, well, if you set up the model correctly anyway, is semi-automated validation written for you within the views. Let's bring that to life. Give a demo of what I mean by this. Inside the category model, I actually decorated this property with an attribute called required. I then give this attribute an argument, which was the error message that it was to generate when I broke that rule. That is, when I didn't actually supply something that was required. But how does that manifest itself? Well, let's have a look. I'm going to create new. I'm going to give it a description. But I'm not going to give it a name. Oh, look, I haven't given it a name, but I'm still going to press the create button. Ah, the form hasn't been sent. I get a clear, well-defined error message because name is required. I didn't have to write any jQuery. I didn't have to write any JavaScript. It was written for me, and all I did was tell the model a particular property had some requirements. In this case, it was required. So I'm going to give it another name. I press create, and here's yet another category. There it is. Here's another name. Here's another description. They're both incredibly silly and useless. So what we're now going to do is delete them. Once again, watch the bottom left-hand corner. I'm going to hover my mouse over the delete of this particular entry, this particular object, and have a look at the URL. It's http localhost / category because that's the name of the controller / delete because that's the name of the action. And I actually seem to have a strange number, 735, whatever it is. That is the primary key for this object that was created by my data access layer within the class. And it is that number that is going to be driven into the categories controller. And in particular, it is going to be sent hurtling into the first phase of the delete. The first phase of the delete Well, it needs to know what you want to delete. It needs to get hold of that object so it can delete it. So the first part is exactly the same as the edit. Please can we get hold of this particular category that you are now going to destroy? So I'm going to dive into the data access layer of that particular class. I'm going to use the get by ID method. I'm going to get myself a local copy of that. If it's not null, well, I don't think it would be unless I inadvertently drove straight to this action within this controller via the URL and didn't go through the form. Now, we might have to protect ourselves from that sort of malarkey later on. But in this particular case, category will be valid because it had a hypertext link pointing at it. And what I'm now going to do is return a copy of that for confirmation. So here we go. I want to delete you. Do you really want to delete me? Yes, you're a goner. When I press delete, this time it will be the delete confirmation action, the delete confirmation method that's going to come to life. Once again, I grab hold of the object I want to delete, but I actually then call the delete method within my class, which will remove it from the list. You're a goner. I'm going to do the same to you because I don't like you either. And you're a goner too. So, I now have a little project which is bringing to life the major ideas behind the MVC framework. The key players are the model, which represents and holds the data, in this case just test data, the controllers that conduct the orchestra, they effectively manipulate the data and bring to life the right views when required, and the views which are HTML templates which are populated at runtime so we can enjoy the data out of the model.